Hey guys, so here's the second part of our 4.2 day 2 notes. We are going to once again graph quadratic functions in intercept form. Okay, let's look at example 2. The first thing we're going to do is identify our p and q values. Remember, for p and q, we do the opposite of what we see. So let's look at what's inside the parentheses. We have x plus 1. So remember, we do the opposite. So the opposite would be -1. Then we have x minus 5. That is going to be the opposite, so we're going to do plus 5. Notice our a value, I'm going to put that here too, is 1/2. Okay? Okay, so let's go ahead and find the vertex. Now remember, to find the vertex, we got to use a little formula to find the x value. That's going to be our p plus q divided by 2. So here we have -1 plus 5 divided by 2. That means we get 4 divided by 2, which gives us 2. Now, to find the y value, we plug that into our equation. So we have 1/2, and then we have 2 plus 1, and 2 minus 5. Now, let me show you how we're going to plug this into our calculator. So notice we do have an a value, that's a fraction. So I'm going to use parentheses around that fraction. So I'm going to do 1 divided by 2 in the parentheses. Now I'm going to start a new parentheses and do 2 plus 1. And then I'm going to do another set of parentheses and do 2 minus 5 here. And then enter. So we get -4.5. So that's going to be our y value. Okay, so we have 2, -4.5. Now our next thing is going to be the X-Intercepts. Remember, we write these as ordered pairs. So we figured out our P and Q. So our P was -1, so we're going to have -1, 0. Because remember, P and Q are the X values, okay? And then we have 5 zeros. Okay, now our next thing is to be the Axis Symmetry. That's going to be X equals whatever the X value of the vertex is, which in this case is 2. Okay, now let's go ahead and we're going to graph, so we need to do our XY table. I'm going to add another little thing here, put 2, -4.5 in the middle, okay? Now I'm going to choose some points. So I'm going to pick 2 x values that are smaller, so like 1 and 0, and I'm going to use 3 and 4. Okay, so once again, we're just going to plug this into our calculator. It makes it a lot easier. So let's try 1 here, okay? So remember, we have the 1/2, which is our a value, so don't forget that. If you forget it, then it's going to be a little bit trickier. There we go. So we can definitely see what we have up here. So now I'm going to plug 1 in for each of the x's. So make sure you do that. You're plugging 1 into each of the x's. So we have 1 plus 1. And then 1 minus 5. And we get -4. So make sure for 1 you put -4 and for 3. Now let's plug 0 into there. So I have 1 divided by 2. And then I'm going to do 0 plus 1. And then 0 minus 5. We get -2.5. Okay, let's go ahead and plug that into our table here. So we get -4, -4. And then -2.5. Now, before we graph these or plot these points, let's talk about, is this graph going to open up or open down? Do we have a vertex as a min or max, etc.? Okay, so here, notice our a value is positive, so that means we do open up. Our a value is greater than 0. That means our vertex is going to be a minimum. Okay. Every single time our graph opens up, our vertex will always be a minimum because it's going to be the lowest point on the graph. Now let's kind of talk about vertical stretch or shrink. Notice our a value is something other than 1. Let's take the absolute value of 1/2. We get +1/2, which is less than 1. So that means in this case we will have a vertical shrink, meaning our graph is going to get wider, of 1/2. Okay, so kind of going back to those transformations we talked about. Okay, let's go ahead and graph this function. So I have 2, negative 4.5, so 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to be a little bit in the middle, which is okay. And then negative 4, and then negative 2.5. So 1, 2, boom. And if you want to, you can include your X-Intercepts, which was going to be our 5, 0, and negative 1, 0. And notice that our graph does open up, so we did this correctly. And our vertex is a minimum, so it's the lowest point on this graph here. Okay, let's go ahead and do example 3. Now, what I would like you to do is pause this video and do example 3 on your own. Okay, let's see what you got here. So for our vertex, notice our P and Q. So we're going to have negative 3 and positive 1. Our A value is negative 2. So we do P plus Q divided by 2. So here we have our negative 3 plus 1. So we get negative 1 here. We plug this back in. We have negative 2 times negative 1 plus 3. And once again, you can just plug this into your calculator as I have written. Now, because our A value is negative 2, so I'll show it for this one, you do not need to use parentheses. So we're just going to do automatically negative 2 and then do negative 1 plus 3. Notice I use the negative sign for the 1. And then I have to do negative 1. Make sure for this one you do minus and then the 1. So negative just represents you're making a negative, minus as meaning that you're actually subtracting. Now, if you put parentheses around the negative 2, you can do that, and you should still get the same answer here. So it's really up to you, but when it's an integer and not a fraction, you don't need to put parentheses around that number. Just letting you know. Okay, so we have negative 1, 8. Okay, let's do our X-intercepts. We have negative 3, 0, and 1, 0. Remember, P and Q is the opposite of what you see, and that negative 3 and 1 represent the X-intercept, so where our graph crosses the X-axis, meaning the Y value has to be 0. And then Axis Symmetry is going to be X equals negative 1. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and just do it here. Let's just talk about if this graph will open up or down. If you notice, our A is negative, so our graph is going to open down. Because our A value is less than 0, therefore our vertex is going to be a max, so it's going to be the highest point on the graph. And then notice that our A is something other than 1. Let's take the absolute value of negative 2, which gives us positive 2. That is greater than 1, and so therefore we do have a vertical stretch. So don't forget, when you are doing that, you have to take the absolute value of your A to figure out if it's a stretch or shrink. And it's by a positive 2, not negative. The negative only tells us if we open up or down, okay? And remember, since we are opening down, that means we have a reflection. And it's a reflection over the x-axis. I would write that down. So reflection over the x-axis. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and do our xy table. So we have negative 1, 8, and some numbers smaller like negative 2, negative 3, and we have 0 and 1. I would plug 0 and 1 in, so we get 6. We know 1 is a x-intercept, so that's definitely going to be 0. Negative 3 is an x-intercept. We get negative 2 as 6, okay? So make sure when you plug this in, and I'm going to do it for like the 0. Remember, you should do negative 2, and then parentheses, we have 0 plus 3, and then 0 minus 1. So make sure you're definitely hitting the correct buttons on the graphing calculator there, or whatever calculator you are using. Okay, so we go negative 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then we do the 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then we go here. There we go. Whoops. I did that incorrectly because notice it was going to open up when we should be opening down. So I should go to negative 1 and up 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There we go. Now we're graphing this correctly. Then we go to 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then we go to 1, 0. There we go. So I did make that mistake, and notice I knew, hey, this was wrong because my graph should be opening down. So when you figure out if your graph opens up or down, that should be a key thing whenever you're graphing. Like if it's not going the same way as you're thinking, re-look at how you're maybe plotting the points like me, I was doing the opposite, or your numbers, okay? So now that it is facing down, I graphed this correctly. You can see the vertex is a max. And notice we are narrow in our graph because this is a vertical stretch by 2. Okay, make sure if you have any questions over these notes, you contact me, and make sure you work on the homework assignment. I'll see you guys later.